The United States government actually did carry out on our citizens experiments involving radiation. In one scientists injected plutonium into 18 patients without their knowledge.
For 44 years, Elmer insisted on one thing. He had been used in a human experiment. He didn't discover it decades later. He knew it from the moment his life suddenly split in two. It began with a violent jolt on a train platform when he was thrown forward as the train came to an abrupt stop. Soon after, doctors delivered a shocking diagnosis: cancer. He was isolated in a separate ward, away from other patients. Something about the explanation didn't sit right. Elmer became convinced that something else had been done to him, something that kept him in the hospital. After discharge, his life was shaped by a single belief. He was a test subject. At a follow-up hospital, his doctor refused to take him seriously. Instead, he labeled Elmer paranoid schizophrenic, turning his warnings into evidence of mental illness. This doctor remained responsible for his care for years, quietly discrediting everything he said. After his death, the truth finally emerged. A journalist called his wife with documents that shattered everything. Elmer had been telling the truth. His doctor wasn't just treating him, he was reporting on him, tracking his body until death on behalf of the U.S. government. Elmer Allen was not insane. He was a test subject. His story is one of many. Hospitalized patients, often misdiagnosed with terminal illnesses, had their identities reduced to code names. Their suffering was repurposed as justification. Without consent, they were injected with plutonium, the same element used to build atomic bombs, powerful enough to wipe entire cities off the map. This was not an accident. It was an experiment, buried for decades inside classified documents. To understand why this was done, and why plutonium was used, we must go back to the world of 1940s wartime America, back to World War II. 3 years before the bombing of Nagasaki, scientists working under J. Robert Oppenheimer faced a major obstacle in the race to build the second atomic bomb, codenamed Fat Man. The bomb relied on nuclear fission, a chain reaction powered by uranium-235. But nature posed a problem. Natural uranium contained only trace amounts of uranium-235, while the vast majority was uranium-238, an isotope useless for sustaining a nuclear chain reaction. Separating the two isotopes was painfully difficult. Their chemical properties were nearly identical, leaving scientists to depend on minute differences in atomic mass. The process was slow, labor-intensive, and uncertain. By late 1944, many feared the bomb would not be ready by January 1945, the scheduled deployment date. Production stalled until an unexpected scientific breakthrough changed everything. That breakthrough began when chemist Glenn Theodore Seaborg revisited an abandoned experiment involving a newly discovered element called neptunium. The study had been left unfinished by nuclear physicist Edwin Madison McMillan. McMillan had been working with a cyclotron, a powerful machine designed to accelerate particles, study nuclear reactions, and create new elements. At the time, the scientific world believed that atoms were not indivisible. But nuclear fission had proven that an atomic nucleus could split apart, releasing enormous energy and free neutrons capable of triggering chain reactions. Fascinated by the discovery, McMillan plunged into a series of experiments. In one, he coated cigarette papers with uranium oxide and placed them inside the cyclotron. When bombarded, the uranium atoms split, sending radioactive fragments in multiple directions. Some fragments embedded themselves in different layers of the paper stack. careful measurements revealed something unusual. One layer showed a radioactive half-life of just 22 minutes. Another showed a half-life of nearly 2 days. Macmillan realized he had created a new element. He named it Neptunium, after the planet Neptune. He suspected Neptunium decayed into yet another unknown element. But before he could prove it, the experiment was left unfinished, and Macmillan moved on. That unfinished work would soon become one of the most important discoveries in modern history. The work was taken up by chemist Glenn Theodore Seaborg with Macmillan's permission. Seaborg led a team that bombarded uranium-238 with neutrons, forcing it to decay into a new element with atomic number 94. The discovery was immediately recognized as extraordinary. Yet publication was delayed. The reason was blunt: military importance. Further experiments followed. In one critical test, scientists discovered that when the nucleus of this new element underwent fission, it released more energy than uranium-235. This was a turning point. Unlike uranium-235, which was rare and difficult to isolate, uranium-238 existed in vast quantities. Now, it could be transformed into something far more powerful. The element was named plutonium. To protect secrecy, plutonium was classified under the code name 49, derived from its atomic number 94 and atomic mass 239. Plutonium was quickly designated for weapon development. As the program expanded, control shifted to the U.S. military, leading to the creation of the Manhattan Project, directed by General Leslie R. Groves. The project was divided across multiple sites: Oak Ridge under Stafford Warren, Chicago under Robert Stone, the University of California under Joseph Hamilton, and Los Alamos, led by J. Robert Oppenheimer, where weapon design would take place. Soon, batches of plutonium-239 were produced and distributed for testing. These samples were subjected to thousands of experiments. In a declassified document, Oppenheimer recorded 51 grams of plutonium sent to Los Alamos. He noted the material was used in approximately 2,500 experiments, with losses of about 1% per experiment, leaving only 36 grams remaining.
He also projected future losses of an additional 5 to 10 grams. This raised an urgent and unsettling concern. Where was the missing plutonium going? Was it settling on laboratory surfaces, floors, or equipment? And more critically, what danger did its radioactivity pose to the scientists working with it every day? Seaborg was already aware of a grim historical precedent. In the 1920s, radium dial painters had died after prolonged exposure to radium, a substance that, like plutonium, emitted alpha radiation. Their deaths served as a warning. Plutonium, scientists feared, could become a similar catastrophe, unfolding slowly over time. There was another layer of risk. Plutonium was derived from uranium, and uranium was already known to behave like a toxic heavy metal, accumulating in organs such as the kidneys and bones. If plutonium followed the same biological pathways, the consequences could be severe and invisible for years. Understanding how plutonium behaved inside the human body became a matter of urgency. Scientists needed metabolic data. If plutonium compounds were inhaled or swallowed, where would they settle? What amount could the body tolerate? And how could exposure be detected before irreversible damage occurred? These unanswered questions would soon drive decisions that crossed a dangerous ethical line. The fastest way to understand the toxicity of plutonium was through animal testing. Under the direction of Joseph Hamilton, head of one of the 4 Manhattan Project medical subdivisions, experiments were conducted on rats, rabbits, and dogs. The results were alarming. Plutonium concentrated heavily in bone tissue, especially around the bone marrow. the site responsible for blood cell production. Many of the animals developed large tumors across various tissues. Hamilton also observed that in accidents involving high temperatures that cause plutonium containers to rupture, treatment should resemble that of a snake bite. Circulation should be restricted, and the contaminated area should be bled to wash the plutonium out of the body. One critical question remained unanswered. How quickly did plutonium leave the body? The rate of elimination varied widely between animals, making it nearly impossible to estimate what the rate would be in humans. Despite these efforts, scientists at Los Alamos working directly on the atomic bomb under Oppenheimer grew increasingly concerned. The medical team could not reliably detect plutonium elimination or define safe exposure limits. Those fears intensified on August 1st, 1944. Around midday, Don Mastic, a young chemist at Los Alamos, noticed a tingling metallic taste in his mouth. Upon inspection, he discovered that a sealed glass tube containing plutonium chloride solution had partially emptied. When he briefly opened it, some of the solution escaped, struck the wall, and settled on his skin. Other scientists were alerted. Measurements showed that approximately 10 milligrams of plutonium were missing. Mastic's face and mouth were aggressively scrubbed, and his stomach contents were pumped. Yet for days afterward, tests continued to show dangerously high levels of plutonium contamination. This was not an isolated event. 5 other accidents involving wound contamination and inhalation exposure had already occurred. Fear spread through the laboratories. In response, a research program was proposed to Oppenheimer to develop methods for detecting plutonium in urine, feces, and the lungs in order to determine how much remained inside the body. Oppenheimer approved the program, but issued a crucial order. All biological work involving animals or humans would be conducted elsewhere, far from Los Alamos.
By July 1945, as the date of the atomic bombing of Nagasaki drew closer, pressure inside Los Alamos reached a breaking point. Scientists were working 7 days a week, racing toward the first full-scale test of a plutonium weapon. There was no time left for prolonged animal studies. The focus shifted to humans. In a memo summarizing a meeting prepared for Oppenheimer, a lead scientist proposed a chilling solution. Hospital patients at either Rochester or Chicago would be selected for injections of plutonium, ranging from 1 to 10 micrograms. Their urine and feces would then be collected and shipped to Los Alamos for analysis. With that recommendation, a line was crossed. This marked the beginning of human experimentation, but it raised a darker question. How does a scientist persuade a person to accept an injection of a substance used to wipe out entire cities? How could a classified element be introduced into the body of someone who had no knowledge of the program, no clearance, and no choice? Those questions would soon be answered, quietly and deliberately, inside hospital wards far from Los Alamos. At the time, plutonium was still one of the most closely guarded military secrets in the United States. To carry out human testing, everything was buried under layers of classification. For decades, the experiments remained hidden. That secrecy only unraveled because of one journalist. In the late 1980s, Eileen Wilson was reporting in New Mexico when she noticed something disturbing scattered across military bases. Animal dump sites filled with beagles, rabbits, and dogs, many bearing massive tumors bulging from their bodies. The pattern was impossible to ignore. Wilson began asking questions. Her investigation eventually led her to the U.S. Air Force. In a move they would later regret, officials granted her access to a large collection of documents related to radioactive experiments. She was allowed to return every day and review them freely. Each afternoon, she combed through stacks of records. One phrase appeared again and again: Product 49. She kept digging until a single footnote stopped her cold. it listed 18 individuals who had been injected with Product 49. What followed was a long and exhausting investigation, marked by resistance at every level. Government agencies denied involvement. Researchers deflected responsibility. Doctors discouraged her, hoping she would abandon the story. This was before widespread internet access. The victims' identities had been reduced to code words. Still, Wilson worked relentlessly. She uncovered names, addresses, and phone numbers. Often, when she called, relatives answered instead. Many learned for the first time that their loved ones had been used in secret government experiments. As the pattern became clearer, so did the intent. Occupation, race, and medical history repeatedly appeared as selection criteria. Most of the victims held blue-collar jobs. Many were African American. They were not chosen at random. The first patient was classified under the code HP12, short for Human Product 12. His real name was Eb Cade, a 55-year-old African American cement mixer. On his way to work, he was involved in an automobile accident and rushed to Oak Ridge Army Hospital. What followed were the worst days of his life. Cade suffered fractures to his right forearm, left thigh, and right knee. Instead of receiving standard medical care, he became the first target of plutonium experimentation without his knowledge or consent. He was injected with 4.7 micrograms of plutonium, a dose 5 times higher than what was considered safe at the time. Routine treatments, like realigning broken bones, were intentionally delayed to ensure the plutonium circulated throughout his body for later tissue sampling. Samples taken included 15 teeth, tissues from his kneecap, and the top of his lower leg bone. A hospital assistant, unaware of the experiment, described Cade's condition as grave, believing he might not survive. Cade sensed something was wrong but could not identify it. He used his last strength to escape before discharge and died 8 years later from heart failure, while his siblings lived decades longer. The second patient, codenamed CHI-1 for Chicago, was a 68-year-old man with metastasized cancer of the chin and lungs. Injected with 6.5 micrograms of plutonium, he lived another 160 days before an autopsy analyzed plutonium distribution in his body.
Scientists justified these injections by claiming most patients were terminally ill. However, some cases were misdiagnosed. CL1, the first plutonium patient at the University of California, was a house painter diagnosed with stomach cancer and expected to die within 6 months. Injected with plutonium-239 and plutonium-238, he lived another 21 years, proving the diagnosis was wrong. After these 3 cases, the initial excretion studies proved inconclusive. HP12's data was compromised by abnormal kidney function. CHI-1 died too early, and CL-1's data was altered due to partial stomach removal. To address these issues, researchers planned controlled tests on 10 patients, codenamed Human Product. 1 through 10. Rochester was chosen intentionally. The University of Rochester had a specialized metabolism ward designed to track every drop of urine and feces, perfect for studying plutonium. Its staff already had experience with radiation biology under the Manhattan Project, ensuring security and coordination with Oak Ridge and Los Alamos. The experiments ran over 3 6-week periods. The first 2 weeks served as a control period, during which patients received standard diets to measure normal body function. Patients with illnesses affecting the kidneys, bones, or liver were exclusive. At the end of the control period, each subject received a 5 microgram intravenous injection of plutonium. For the next 24 days, all urine and feces were collected, along with periodic blood samples. These studies formed the statistical foundation for determining the safe limits of plutonium in the human body.
11 patients, renamed Human Product 1 through 11, were injected with plutonium
at the Rochester site over a period of 10 months. Older patients were chosen to minimize long-term radiation effects such as cancer, and to allow researchers to track subjects until death for post-mortem analysis. This did not prevent younger adults from being included. 3 patients were 18, 41, and 44 years old. The group consisted of 7 men and 4 women. Within a year, 5 of the patients had died from their diagnosed illnesses. Tissue samples were collected from 3 of the deceased to study plutonium distribution. HP-11 was among these 5. When the lead scientist received news of his death, he scolded Rochester for injecting only 5 micrograms instead of 10 times that amount, around 50 micrograms, as he deemed HP-11's case terminal. He cited similar examples from Chicago. At this point, admission to either division often marked patients as potential test subjects, pending approval. During the Rochester study, the Chicago Health Division authorized plutonium injections in 2 additional patients under their care. Terminal patients received doses stepped up by over 70%, each injected with 95 micrograms of plutonium-238. At the University of California, 2.7 micrograms of plutonium were injected into CAL2, a 4-year-old boy suffering from terminal bone cancer. The final patient, 36-year-old Elmer Allen, codenamed Cal3, was a railroad porter. A fall on the job injured his knee, and subsequent treatment in Oakland failed to help. He was later diagnosed with osteogenic sarcoma in his left leg, a shocking surprise given no family history of cancer.
During his admission, Allen's left leg was marked with a bullseye to identify it. He was injected with plutonium in that leg and made to wait 3 days for the compound to circulate before the leg was amputated mid-thigh. The marked leg was then transported to Los Alamos, incinerated, and the ashes studied to measure plutonium. After the amputation, Allen lost his job and moved states under a new doctor's care. He told anyone who would listen that he had been used as a test subject, but no one believed him. His doctor diagnosed him as a paranoid schizophrenic. Journalist Eileen Wellsome later investigated this doctor and discovered that after Allen had voiced his concerns about being a human experiment, the doctor had secretly contacted the Department of Energy, confirming the truth. The doctor continued to monitor Allen, ensuring his body could be used for research after death. Elmer died with no one believing his story. His experience was not unique. Many victims were dismissed as paranoid. One patient injected at Rochester remained debilitated for life, able to move only her hands, sitting in a chair knitting for years. Her family assumed her behavior was mere worry about her health, unaware of the experiment she had endured. These are the only known patients injected with plutonium. Radioactive experiments continued with other elements, including americium and uranium, all in the name of advancing science, and all conducted without the consent of the humans involved.